Hey, Eric Salahab here, your online instructional coach, with a presentation on how to deal with disruptive and difficult students in online classes. If you're new to online learning, you might be worried about having students in class that are disruptive or difficult. If you're a returning online teacher, you may have had these students in the past, or again, maybe you're thinking about what to do this semester if you run into problems with students. So first of all, let me say, feel free to reach out to me as your instructional coach if you have problems with students, or if you are thinking or worried about having problems with students. Definitely also, you'll see my advice here, reach out to your online lead, online chair. We all deal with students that might be a little bit difficult, annoying, or disruptive. I think what I'm going to present here today are just ways that we might be able to preempt some of these things from happening, to understand why students might have problems in our online classes. So reach out to me if you need anything. So maybe this will be helpful at the beginning of the semester. It's also just an invitation to you to reach out to me as your coach for anything you need this semester. I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. This is a version of a face-to-face workshop that I've done a few times last semester. Since this is a video, you can of course pause the screen at any time if I go too fast and you want to read something, or really reach out to me. I'm happy to send you a copy of this presentation if you want to see the slides. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to hide my little face here. Hopefully that's hiding it. You know how to get a hold of me, eric.salahub@frontrange.edu, or dial me up at 204-8234. First of all, this is probably common sense for those of us who have taught both online and face-to-face, but in the online world, we're really dealing with asynchronous classes, where probably students aren't necessarily online at the same time. Text-based, a lot of the interactions happen through text mediation, through discussion boards and email, and there's a lack of norms. So students are new to online learning, teachers are new to online learning, even students that have been in multiple online classes, everyone is slightly different. And unlike face-to-face classes, right, where we have had so many experiences in face-to-face classes from preschool through kindergarten all the way through graduate school, high school, we have a real sense of kind of what the norms and expectations are. We do, and so do students. It doesn't mean problems don't happen in face-to-face classes, but the norms are more set. And so I think students have a better sense of what their roles and what their classmates' roles are, and what their teachers are doing. The other thing, I think the major difference is, in face-to-face classes, we have that physical presence where we can actually see each other. And we have a lot of verbal communication. So let's just keep this in mind, this difference. I don't think there are more difficult students online necessarily, but the ways that difficulties present themselves might be different. First of all, let me say this. When something happens, you want to assess the situation, but I want to say that there is no amount of careful planning. There's nothing that you can do to guarantee that you won't have annoying, difficult, or disruptive students. But when something comes up, you want to stop before you react and assess the situation. Is it a dangerous or threatening situation? Do you think that someone might hurt him or herself? And is this a Title IX violation or some other legal issue? So I don't think I have to stress this, but we live in an age today where we have to take threats seriously. Those of you who were around the Larimer campus last semester realize that we had an incident on social media where a student posted a threatening video, and we ended up evacuating the campus. So, I don't know where the line is between disruptive and dangerous. That's a judgment call you have to make. And I would say take your gut instinct seriously. If you think something is really threatening, then it's not just a case of something that you should deal with on your own. Reach out to someone in public safety, reach out to your department chair, reach out to me, but do so right away, and let's take it seriously and not wait and see what happens. Sometimes there's an actual mental health issue going on. All we may see are the symptoms of a student who is disruptive or annoying or difficult in class, and we may suspect that the root of this problem is a mental health issue. I'm not a professional, you're probably not a professional, but it is up to us to use our judgment call, right? If we do think a student may be having a mental health crisis or have some mental health issue going on, we can reach out, make a referral, suggest that the student might want to talk to a counselor on campus, use the student of concern form to let someone else know that you think the student might be having a problem. Again, depending on how well you know the student, really consider reaching out and making a referral to free counseling that can happen on the campuses or to community-based services. I guess my point here is, if it's just a difficult student, that's something that teachers deal with all the time. But we may not know if there is an underlying mental health concern. If you think there might be, then I think that's up to you. And I'm certainly going to give you my recommendation as your coach. That's something we can and probably should do, is take our students seriously, take their mental health seriously, and reach out and try to help them if we can. Title IX, if you haven't looked at your D2L site recently, there's a widget that's appearing in all of our courses with new information about Title IX that's going out to our students. I guess what I'm saying here is, if there's something in your class that has to do with, if students are doing something that might be perceived as sexual harassment with, to each other or to you, or if that is, something that might be happening in class, that's not something that you just want to take as a teachable moment, right? I mean, this is something has legal, human resources ramifications. So definitely, if you suspect that it's a Title IX issue, it's probably something that you want to get help with dealing with. And definitely don't just let it rest. I mean, address it right away. I'm also not sure how we want to distinguish the annoying student from the difficult student to the disruptive student. Maybe some students that I would see as just annoying or even fun, you may see as difficult or disruptive. I guess my point here is problems can escalate. A student might start out as annoying, and if we don't, kind of catch that student in the annoying phase and provide an intervention, that might progress to difficult or disruptive. In any case, I'm not sure the right way to classify these distinctions, but I just want to let you know, I think what we're going to talk about today will help you think about all of these sorts of students. But as they get more toward disruptive, I think the need to deal with them becomes more preeminent, because if they're disruptive, they could be disrupting other students' learning, and it's definitely going to be taking a toll on you. In my past life, I was a department chair here at the Larimer campus. I've been a lead instructor. I've been an online lead. So I thought I'd give you just a few tips that I've learned being on the administrative side of some of these sorts of things. Number one, some students have more problem students than others, and I'm not sure what to make of that. Maybe it's because to some extent our view of students differs. Again, maybe a student that I would just see as provocative and interesting, someone else might see as difficult. It may also have to do with how rigorous our rules are or our own take on things, but just to let you know, difficult students may not be distributed evenly among all teachers. Course design and housekeeping issues can be the foundation for problems. So, I think you want to make sure you've got your course design, locked down, and that these housekeeping issues, when we're helping students, for instance, work week by week to know what's going on, those can be the foundation for other kinds of problems, and I'll talk more about that. Problems escalate due to lack of meaningful communication. Generally, the first time the problem crops up, it's not a crisis. But if you don't deal with it right away, or you don't deal with it in a way that the student perceives as helpful, or for whatever reason, if the student doesn't even read your email, or somehow the communication or lack of fruitful communication between student and teacher can definitely allow problems to escalate. So I think it's worth dealing with problems ASAP to try to preempt them so they don't escalate. And I think I will also end with this. I don't think it's just the teachers who have quote unquote higher standards that have more problems. I don't think it's teachers that are more rigorous that have more problems. So I don't think you should hear me saying that you should dumb anything down or be a hand holder in order to not have problems. So that's some tips to start us off with. So I'm going to talk about, I tried to classify students into different categories. And I'm going to talk about some case studies to give us a sense of what's going on here. But I'm not sure exactly. I think these categories overlap. My intent here was to break up all the sorts of disruptions and difficulties that can happen into different categories, mainly just so I could have a way to frame what I'm going to talk about over the next 45 minutes or so. So I'm going to start off with students who are confused and don't understand. We're going to then move on to talk about students who need to catch up, those who don't agree with the way you do things, those who are disinterested and disengaged, the person or the student who disrupts your discussions, who is disrespectful to classmates or to you. So let's go ahead and start. So everything I'm going to talk about, I'm going to do in two parts. First of all, I'm going to talk about what do we do to stop something? It's already happening, and we need to intervene, right? A problem has cropped up. What can I do about it? And then I want to talk about the detour, right? How could we have possibly prevented this problem from happening in the first place? So I'm going to start with the interventions first, because if you have a problem, what you don't want to hear is, what could you do next time to make this not happen? I think that's really important, but I want to talk about what can we do to make it stop now, but realize that what probably makes the most sense is to be proactive and think about how could we design our course to minimize these sorts of problems from happening in the first place. So how about a student that's confused? This might be the student who has problems with technology, who doesn't read directions, who's not following your instructions. This is a student who maybe is asking way too many questions, right? You're getting emails every day and phone calls. You're getting bombarded with questions. They take a lot of your time. Or the student who won't take initiative to find the answers themselves. So what are some interventions? What do you do when a student hits you with questions and you want to intervene to stop the questions or stop the confusions from happening? First of all, realize that there's a help desk. There's a 24/7 help desk that a student can call in. It's a 1-800 number, or it's a toll-free number, and then information can be found right in D2L. Help desks can deal with anything having to do with technology. They can also help students with basic D2L sorts of things. If the help desk can't answer the students' questions, those students get passed on to Front Range Online Learning. I think another idea is to deal with screencasts. Sometimes doing a screencast, which is maybe a version of kind of what I'm doing here to you, where you pull up something in your class or a document and you do a little video with a narration, it might be more fruitful than just trading emails with students. Maybe you want to reach out with a video conference using WebEx or a phone call as a way to, sidetrack a problem and stop the, sometimes communication by email that's not so fruitful. Take it right to a phone call. That can help. And when students are confused and you're trying to help them, one thing you might do is ask them for clarity and focus on what they're confused about as a way to help you help them. So, the student who says they don't understand anything. How do you help students find clarity? Sometimes you get bombarded with emails, or sometimes you get an email or a discussion post from a student who basically writes an entire paragraph or a mini multi-paragraph essay about all these problems that they're having. So some suggestions if that happens. First, ask them, what do you already know? Copy and paste the relevant directions. So before I'm going to answer your question, go to the syllabus and copy and paste what you know, right? What is the assignment description? What is the place in the syllabus where it talks about the schedule? Where in the syllabus does it talk about the grading scheme? Tell me what you know about the grading scheme, and then ask your question that you need clarity on. This helps students, actually look for resources. It also helps you know where is their confusion. And if you require or ask students to copy and paste the relevant directions first, that may preempt them, because if they actually go look up the information in the syllabus, they may find the answer there. Before you answer questions, you may say, be specific about which assignment, which page numbers, etc. Right? Before I can help you, you need to be very clear about exactly what you're having a question about. So you need to tell me not just the quiz, but which quiz, not just the questions, but which questions, not just the chapter, but where in the chapter, which quote. And you might even do something like this. If you have multiple questions, please send me multiple emails instead of sending me a paragraph that's packed with 10 questions, right? Can you put them in bullet points? Can you list them from highest priority to lowest priority? Sometimes you need to ask a student to slow down a little bit and parse out their questions. They may know more than they think they know. So a few tips about students who really think they don't understand anything. I already mentioned screencasts. I don't know. I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. I think sometimes it is much faster to do a 2-minute screencast using Screencast-O-Matic, a free program, where you could answer a student's question, you could show them where their Dropbox is, you could navigate over the syllabus, scroll down and show them exactly where the answer to their question is. You could go to the quiz tool, you could show them how to do something, you can go to the gradebook. Instead of trying to describe in words how to do something in D2L, you can actually just show students how to do it. You could also do a WebEx for the student or a Google Hangout. So if you don't want to just send them a screencast, you could say, I can help you. Let's find 10 minutes where we can both get online at the same time. I'll set up a WebEx and we can get in there and look at something. You can share a screen. This may help the student, but it also just may be more efficient for you to do that. What about some prevention strategies? First of all, let me tell you a little bit about who your online students are. You teach at Front Range Community College. I guess I want to challenge some of the assumptions you might have about who your students are. Are they really online learners? Are they really first-generation college students? How busy are they? Are they really online tech-savvy students, or would they really prefer face-to-face? And are they new to online learning? Let me answer these questions for you briefly. Most of our students, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say the vast majority of students taking online classes at Front Range are not quote-unquote online learners. These are not some tech-savvy group of students who have self-declared, based on their own understanding of their learning styles, students who learn best online. These are probably the vast majority of our students are students who, if they could, in the best of all worlds, they would have time to come to campus and take face-to-face classes. They prefer face-to-face learning, but they can't take face-to-face classes because they're busy. They're working full-time, they have kids, they have a career, they have a family. They cannot make their schedules work taking only face-to-face classes. So they need to take online classes. Our most successful students at Front Range are students that cobble together face-to-face and online classes, and they match them together into a program or a certificate. So if you keep that in mind, there's a reason why our students are confused. Most of them are new to online learning, and even if they've taken multiple online classes, our online classes are not cookie-cutter classes, so your class is different. I'll also say that Front Range online students are very likely to be first-generation college students. They are more likely than the average students to be Pell eligible, to have quote-unquote first-generation tendencies. So, not only are these students who are probably likely to be confused about college in general, but they're taking online classes. Online students skew older than, average Front Range students. They're more likely to have full-time jobs, to have families. So they're really busy. Now that is not a justification for being confused, but it might explain why students are confused, right? They don't have the time, or they haven't made the time to sit down and scour and read everything. So they're new to online learning, and so are we. So I think this is just to give you a sense of there's a reason why students are confused, because online learning is new and different, and we can help them be less confused. That will help them succeed. It'll definitely help our jobs be easier as well. So let's talk about preventing confusion. First of all, your class is confusing. It may not be confusing to you because you built it. You designed the content, all the assignments. You've looked at everything multiple times, maybe semester after semester after semester. But my sense is if someone else looks at your class, they're going to find things in it that are confusing. So luckily we have a ready to run team. They've probably looked at least the first 2 weeks to let you know that your class is ready to run. But you may want to look things over again and through the eyes of a student. Small errors aren't small. If dates are wrong, if you've got dates from a previous semester, anything in there that's confusing, typos, whatever it is, quizzes that aren't released on time, you name it, small errors aren't small. So again, it will cause angst for students if they see something. They're not going to assume, well, my instructor just neglected to update the dates. They may think they're in the wrong class. One of the things I do is I tell students, you are going to find errors. I do my best to try to make my class error-free, but I tell students, please look for errors. If you see typos, if you see dates that are wrong, let me know. Help proofread the class, and if you find an error, let me know right away. I'm going to praise you. I will probably talk about you in a midweek update in the class and say, thanks to Tony for finding that I didn't open the quiz on time. That also just lowers the expectations a little bit. I'm human too. If you find an error, I'm not going to hold you accountable for it. I will always, give you the benefit of the doubt, but don't just find an error and deal with it. If you as a student see something wrong with the class, let me know. So I think I think that helps. Get an outside review. You've already had a ready to run review. Get your online lead to look at something. I'm your online coach. Reach out to me if you want me to look at an assignment sheet, discussion rubric, whatever it is. If you want to see if it's confusing or find ways that it might be less confusing, reach out to me. And again, tell students to expect confusion. I tend to tell students that it usually takes the first third of the semester to really get a handle on how to run the course. In my class, that's 5 weeks. I don't mean that everything will be totally confusing for 5 weeks, but what I tell students is expect there to be a ramp-up period where the class is new, the way we run the class is new, the way you succeed in the class and use the tools are new, but the confusion should minimize over the first few weeks of the class. We're going to all figure it out by week 3 or week 4, and then we'll be in good shape. So I just tell students confusion is to be expected, confusion is normal, it's not something to freak out about, we'll work through it. Maybe you want to reach out before the semester. Maybe you want to send your students an email with the syllabus or getting started information or a video. Maybe you want to use a syllabus quiz or a scavenger hunt to make sure students have actually looked through the course. I know instructors that do both of these things. You may want to build in practice with all the course tools during week 1. Let's practice with the quiz tool. Let's practice with the survey tool. Let's practice with the Dropbox. Practice with discussions. So by the end of week 1, students have actually had experience with all the tools that they're going to need to learn over the course of the semester, and they've done so in low stakes examples where their grade's not riding on anything. Offer advice from former students. Something I do, when I say I co-teach a class with Carrie Mitchell. It's an online learning community. At the end of the semester, we always ask students for reflections. How'd the course go? And one of the things we always say is, what advice would you give to students taking this course next semester? If they're going to read your advice in week 1, what would you tell them about how to succeed in the course? And then we just copy and paste those things, and our students get to see advice from the previous semester at the beginning of the course. And I got to tell you, our students really like that. And maybe it'll surprise you, probably not. Our students often give them exactly the same advice that Carrie and I would give the students. They say things like, make sure to look at the calendar, make sure to look at the schedule, make sure to, don't fall behind, make sure to participate in open discussions, ask questions, all the things that we probably tell students, but they, coming from another student, it might come across a little bit differently. Use a weekly agenda, use a checklist, and offer pacing advice. No matter if you teach your course by units or chapters or modules, I think it is worth laying out your course week by week so students know exactly what they need to accomplish each week of the course. Not only what are the assignments due, but how should they be allocating the 9 to 12 hours a week or more or less, right, depending on how many credits your course is and how many weeks. How should they be allocating their time each week? And again, if you have questions about this, I can help you with that. You might also consider setting up a frequently asked questions where students could go and read that before they reached out to you with their questions. Assignment sheets and rubrics are a great idea. If you need help building assignment sheets and rubrics, these really help students know expectations for assignments and essays and how they're graded, right? These are some of the confusions that students often have. Allow or require self-assessment. The more students have a chance to assess themselves using a rubric or using a quiz to mastery or that sort of thing, it takes the pressure off of them needing to be perfect on something that counts or is weighted heavily. So if you let students self-assess, they can answer their own questions. They won't be confused when the actual assignment happens. Offer timely and meaningful feedback and formative assessments. What is a formative assessment? A formative assessment is some sort of an activity in the class where students are doing work and you as the teacher get to see them doing the work before that summative thing where they actually have to demonstrate mastery of a skill. If you build in formative assessments, that's the time where you are expecting to see their confusion. And you can actually build in the answers to that confusion as part of the normal work of the class. That way, students will expect to be doing work that's formative in nature, and the feedback on that formative work will be the clarification of the confusions that's part of the normal working of the class before they get to those big capstone assignments. Peer reviews, they can be done on papers, but really peer reviews are a way to have your students help each other figure things out. And also, you can offer samples. So if you have sample papers, sample lab assignments, sample discussion quotes, right? Ask students permission this semester when they do good work or exemplary work or even work that's, I'd say mediocre or solid but not A or B work. Some examples from students from previous semesters can really help students from this semester translate your assignment sheet into practice, right? Here's the assignment sheet, and here are 3 sample papers that students from last semester completed, or here are what some good discussion posts look like, or good Dropbox assignments. It's also a great way to praise your students when they do good work, as you say, I'd really like to be able to use this in a future semester as a student sample. Screencast to prevent confusion. I'm not actually going to show this screencast, but I'll just say, this is something that I do in my in my online class. I ask students to update their D2L settings. I want a certain protocol for emails, for instance. I want every student to have a signature line in their email. I have certain protocols that I want students to use in discussion. And I have to tell you, in a very short video, I can tell students exactly how to update their D2L settings. It's a lot easier than trying to write out those directions on a document. So I just create a screencast and I say, here's how to update your D2L settings. It would really work with almost anything in D2L that you want your students to do. Well, we're almost 30 minutes in. You can see this will probably go at least an hour or more. I hope this is worthwhile. I'm trying to talk fast, but I want it to be meaningful to you. So, pause, take a breather if you need to. Again, reach out to me if you've got particular questions. So let's move on to the student that needs to catch up. This may be the student falls behind and now they're making excuses, or now they want extra credit because they've missed work, or they've missed important conversations and discussion. So what do we do with the student that falls behind? So a suggestion that might work for you. Focus on student success. When a student falls behind, what is in her best interest? In my class, I tend to say this. It's probably more important to participate in what's going on right now and catch up later. So if you've missed a week of class, don't put this week on hold for a week while you make up last week, because then you're perpetually behind. I tend to tell students the most important thing you could be doing is doing what we're working on now. Jump into the ongoing discussions, make sure you're doing the Dropbox assignments and the quizzes that are due this week, and then once you accomplish the work that's due now, use the time you have to go back and make up work, assuming I'm going to allow makeup work. This to me is really critical, because once a student falls behind, if they're not participating in the class currently, they're missing those connections, you're not capturing those teachable moments, they're not part of that cohort, and that can really lead them to just end up dropping out of the class, withdrawing, or failing. So at least consider saying, let's do what's due now, and let's make up what's late later. You might also be really serious about saying, is it in the student's best interest to withdraw from the class? If they've missed so much work that they can't possibly succeed, you may want to offer some advice that dropping if it's before the census date, or withdrawing might be the best option. It might not be the best option, but I don't know. If a student's missed 3 or 4 weeks of class, it just may not be possible for them to get the grade that they want. And if that's the case, dropping might be the best option, or withdrawing. And you could certainly reach out to me, reach out to one of your online retention specialists if you want to dig in and find out what might be the best advice for your particular student. Ask them to plan for success. You know, could you use intelligent agents? Could you build in some flexibility? Those are some things you might want to think about. In my online class, the class Carrie and I teach, an activity we do week 1 is called Planning for Success, and I'm happy to share this with anyone. This is where we actually ask students things like this. What is your goal in terms of the grade that you want? What grade do you want in this class? And the student usually types in, you can guess, they want an A. Question 2, I can't scroll down, this is a screenshot, but this says, now you've told me you want an A, review from the syllabus what Carrie and I have told you you're going to need to do to succeed in this class. And then there's a text box there that says, how do you actually plan to live up to the requirements of this class and earn the grade you want? So this activity that we have in our class, it's called Planning for Success. It really puts the onus on the student to talk about the grade they want, to acknowledge how rigorous the class is, how much time they're going to need to spend in the class, how many different days per week they're going to need to log in. So they're really writing to me a little contract to say, yes, I want an A in the class. I understand that I'm going to have to spend all these hours and all of these different days per week, and here's how I'm going to do it. And then they submit this during week 1. And I have to tell you, this is, since Carrie and I added this to our class, it's been something that's very successful. It lets us then say, when students aren't performing up to par in week 3, we can really say, look, in week 1 you said you wanted an A. Since then you haven't been participating in discussion. If you want to earn that A that you said you wanted, you need to step it up. So this lets us hold students accountable to the goal that they set at the beginning of the semester. You might also think about using the quiz tool for things other than quizzes. So if I just showed you this activity is actually in the quiz tool, but we're calling it a guided thinking activity. So we use the quiz tool to ask students to work through problems. So it encourages time on task, it makes homework meaningful, and it allows for us to give feedback to students in the class. So again, if you want more examples of that, feel free to reach out to me. Maybe you can build in some flexibility and autonomy into your course. I read about a course design where an instructor built in more points into the class than students actually needed to earn their A. If you're interested, reach out to me. I can show you the paper. But it was interesting. This instructor really said, if students miss a few discussions, I want to allow them some flexibility to make up those points with other parts of the class, maybe more short papers or something. I don't know if that works for you. But if you can be flexible in your class, that might build in the possibility that students really won't fall behind. So maybe if you have 12 discussions, students only need to do 10 of them, and they can drop one from the first 6 weeks and one from the second 6 weeks or something like that. Anyway, it's possible. If you can build in some flexibility into your course, that might help students not fall behind. And you might also build in autonomy into the course by allowing students to make some choices and take ownership of some of those things that they're doing in the class. I would also ask you, as the philosopher and as your coach, to really consider, why do you have the rules that you have? If your syllabus says, I don't accept late work, I guess the student might wonder, why won't you accept late work? And maybe you have a good rationale, and maybe your rationale is, I don't accept late work because once the week's gone, I don't have time to grade late work, adding the grading burden from the previous week into the next week. I just don't have time to do it. That's a rationale. Maybe your rationale is, I don't accept late work because I need to give feedback on that formative assessment in a timely manner so that it makes sense. If you're turning in the work late, my feedback then becomes irrelevant, so that's why I don't accept late work. Maybe your rationale is it's just not fair to the other students, but I guess I would ask you to reconsider those rules. Why not accept late work? If you're really interested in what a student can do, maybe allowing them to turn work in late is okay. Anyway, food for thought. I'm not sure that fairness to other students is the most important thing in a class. Unless you run your class based on some kind of a grading curve, the grade 1 student earns in the class is irrelevant to what another student earns in the class. So I don't know, maybe it's fine to accept late work. Anyway, I guess my point is, I think it's worth considering, why do you have the rules you have? And if you don't have a rule, if there's no good reason to have that rule and you're okay with changing the rule, maybe you can help students succeed by just rethinking the rules you have about, for instance, late work or missed assignments or whatever. So again, I'm not telling you to change your rules. I'm just asking you to be thoughtful about why you have those rules. And that thoughtfulness, if nothing else, I think can help students realize the rules are not arbitrary, that you actually have reasons for them. What about students who don't agree with you, right? So these might be students that complain about grades, that ask for exceptions to the rules, or that challenge your judgments on things. So this is the I disagree student. So interventions for complainers. First of all, pick your battles. You may not want to fight every battle with every student that complains. I guess what I'm saying is sometimes it might be okay to just give in and say, okay, right? I'll leave that up to you. But maybe you don't want to fight every single battle. Again, if we refer back to previous, maybe it's easier just to say, I'll accept late work than to fight every student who wants to turn in late work. I don't know. Suggest self-assessment using the assignment sheet and rubrics. So when a student complains about how they were graded, you could say, well, why don't you use the rubric that I provided and tell me what grade you think your paper earned and justify that. Once you do that, I'll be willing to look at it and give you my answer, right? Often just asking the student to I don't know, do their own self-assessment using a grading rubric, often they'll grade themselves harder. Maybe one of the fastest interventions is to just stop trading emails and shoot the student a screencast, suggest a WebEx, or do a phone call. The 80-20 rule, I guess, goes with pick your battles. The 80-20 rule is, I think, something from economics, and it goes something like this. 80% of the complaints in your class will come from 20% of the students. And so you just may want to pick your battles in terms of how much effort you put into entertaining questions and ideas from some students. If you spend all of your time addressing the complainers, then the 20% of your students that complain, the 80% of your students may miss out on, getting those teachable moments and whatnot. So I don't know. The more we can, have fewer students in the class that complain, the more we can push those complaints back and make a student deal with them, him or herself. It gives us more time to deal with the students in our class who aren't complaining, and we might be able to give them that kind of positive feedback. I will also say this, complainers are initiative takers. So students who have the initiative to complain, we might be able to take that virtue of initiative taking and spin it in a positive way in the class. So, if nothing else, students that complain are not apathetic, right? They care enough about the class to reach out to you, and that student who is frustrating or annoying can be turned into an ally. So, having just watched Star Wars, maybe you can turn that student from the dark side to the light side. Maybe you can encourage that student to take initiative in a positive way. Anyway, more on that if you want, reach out to me. So, as I said, definitely have students look at the assignment sheets and rubrics. Let students behind the curtain. The more you can help students figure out why you're doing what you do, I think students are less likely to complain. So I think it's just worth sharing. What is the rationale for your rules? Why are you doing what you're doing? have clear policies and rules, justify those. Again, why do you have those rules? That way students know they're not arbitrary. And include formative assignments in your class so you have the opportunity to address those complaints in the normal process of a class, right? When complaints and confusions are supposed to be happening during that part of the class where they're learning the material. Let me give you an example. I talked about rules and why we have them, so let me give you a spotlight on my face-to-face class. For more than 15 years, I had a punitive attendance policy. When students didn't come to class, if they missed more than 3 classes, they started losing points. And I had this rule in my class because in philosophy, coming to class is really important, because if you're not there, you don't become part of the discussion. And in philosophy, philosophy is based on, engaged students and discussions. And so I wanted students to come to class, and I thought the best way to encourage them to come to class was to design an attendance policy that incentivized them to come by punishing them when they missed class. When I started co-teaching with Carrie, we had to come to a consensus on our attendance policies, and Carrie made a suggestion that, in her experience, punitive attendance policies were not effective. And it really made me think about my own classes, and I realized that even though I had a punitive attendance policy, I still struggled with poor attendance. And so we switched up our class, so we took away the punitive attendance policy and we added an incentive-based policy. Instead of losing points for missing class, students earned points for very good attendance. In fact, our policy was if you miss 2 or fewer classes, one class or 0 classes by the midterm, you got to skip out on a midterm assignment that was worth 5% of the course grade. And then if you missed 0 or 1 classes between the midterm and the final, you get to skip out on a final assignment that was worth 5% of the grade. So if students over the course of a 15-week semester, 45 class meetings, if they could miss 2 classes or fewer, they would really earn 10% of the class for free. Now, why did we do this? Well, we used to give 10% of our grade for participation, so we just reallocated that participation grade to attendance. And in one semester, I went from having, a quarter or a third of my students gone on a given day to having practically perfect attendance every single day. When I really asked myself why I had that punitive attendance policy, and I realized that the goal of the policy was getting students to come to class, once I realized that I wasn't meeting that goal, I was willing to change my rule, and the new rule was much better at attaining the outcome I was looking for. So I'm not suggesting you change your attendance policy. What I am suggesting is if you really think about your rules and why you have them, and you assess the rule based on the outcome that it's, giving you, you might decide that some of your rules, maybe you'll decide you want to change them. I'm a huge fan of incentive-based attendance policies. I actually had students say this after coming to class every day before the midterm and then not having to take the midterm assignment. They would say things like this: wow, Eric, if I really knew how much, if you come to class all the time, you really learn more. And if I really knew how great it was to come to class all the time, I would have done it more often. Or of course, teachers want to say, duh, obviously if you come to class all the time, things are going to make more sense, you're going to feel more a part of the class. But for whatever reasons, not all students realize that. And so as an ethicist, I think this is a way to help students build those kinds of professionalism skills that we want them to build. What about the disengaged and disinterested student? So this is the student that may be apathetic, uninterested, or does the bare minimum. What can we do to help this student do better? Find the teachable moment, utilize resources including advising, tutoring, reach out personally, be authentic, let the students know that you miss their presence in class and their presence in class is worthwhile. So I think the number one way to prevent apathy and disinterest is to focus on teacher presence and try to foster intrinsic motivation in students. Online classes can be robotic. They can feel like there's nobody there. Students can feel like they're isolated and alone. And again, think about it. These are students who would probably really rather be in face-to-face classes. They are in an online class, but the experience they're looking for is the experience that they would have had in a face-to-face class. They want a real teacher. They want a teacher who cares about them. They want to know that the teacher's out there. They want to know that their teacher is professional and knows his or her stuff, wants them to succeed. And so I think by reaching out and being a real person, we can help students foster intrinsic motivation in the class. If students don't have intrinsic motivation, if they just feel like they're going through the motion to get that grade, it's probably not a surprise that they have apathy and disinterest in the class. If you've worked with me at all over the last couple of years, you've probably seen this slide before. This is research into students who have nominated online teachers as master teachers over the last 3 years, and you can really see what they love about online classes is classes where there is a teacher in the class that's passionate, excited, and inspires them to learn. They love it when teachers are warm, caring, and friendly, when teachers want them to succeed, when they make a personal connection with their teacher, right? And that's something that in an online class it's more difficult to do. You're not standing in front of them for 45 hours a semester building that empathy. Let's do this. They don't get to see your face very often. It's one of the reasons I'm such a big proponent of videos. Instructor-created videos. I don't like watching myself either. I can actually see myself when I'm creating this. But my sense is when my face pops up on the screen, you pay more attention. You realize this is not just a PowerPoint, it's on YouTube, it's out there. This is a real person. It's me, your online instructional coach, someone who wants you to succeed this semester. I care about you. I want to work with you. I want you to succeed. I want to hold you accountable to the appropriate rigor that you've paid for in this class, but I'm here to help. Just in this exchange, I think you can see seeing my face makes a difference. Again, I'm an ethics teacher, and in my experience and the research I've done, faces build empathy. And so, letting your students see you, letting that fun and passion and excitement come through, whether it's through a video or however you do it, through feedback, I think that's, my number one advice is, help students build intrinsic motivation, and you can do that by being a real person. What about the student who disrupts discussion? I know I'm going quickly. I want to try to finish this in the next 15 minutes or so. If this whets your appetite, feel free to reach out to me for more on any of this stuff. We know discussions form the cornerstone of many, if not most, online classes, and so when there are problems in discussions, that causes problems for you and definitely for other students, because discussions are often a public forum, and so when there's a student who is disruptive or difficult in discussions, that can be not only a problem for you, but a problem that can grow. It can cause problems for other students. It can lead to mutinies and all kinds of things. So this may be a student who makes too many posts, who makes posts that are uninformed. They may be misleading, incorrect. They may be tangents. They may take us away from the goals of the discussion this week. They may be one-liners that don't drive the discussion forward, that just clog up the discussion. So what are all the different ways that students may be disruptions in discussions, and what can we do about it? So first of all, let me say this. As someone who teaches ethics and philosophy in an online class using discussions, these are just some of the things that we talk about in my online class, the one that Carrie and I teach. We talk about these things before the midterm. And as you can see, there's probably not a topic that's provocative or potentially problematic, that is politically charged, personally charged, that you might think could go off the rails. So I'll say this. I don't think there is any connection between a provocative or interesting discussion topic and problem students. So don't be afraid of having interesting, provocative discussion topics. If anything, I think it is more fun to have provocative, interesting discussion topics, because those may be the things that'll intrinsically motivate your students to care. There'll be discussion topics that your students won't think of as busy work, that they'll be interested in. And I'll just let you know, if you're moderating these discussions and if you've set up the right protocols, there's no reason to think that, look, I've been teaching online ethics and intro to philosophy and philosophy of religion for more than 20 years. In all of that time, with literally thousands of students, I have had only 2 or 3 times where I've ever had something happen in discussion where I really felt like I needed to get in there and intervene. It is extremely rare. So first of all, just don't be afraid of online discussions. Don't fear online discussions, but I think you can help your students understand the purpose and goals of discussion. Why do we have discussions every week? Why are we doing this in the class? How did the discussions tie with the other important things we're doing in the class, etc. Maybe you want to implement some new discussion rules. If your current discussion rules aren't working, I'll offer some suggestions for changing them. If something happens in discussion, you might want to follow up with a personal email, a phone call, or a screencast. And since discussions tend to be public, you probably want to address problematic discussion posts in public as well. So emailing and talking to students. When you reach out by email, after a student posts something that you find offensive or problematic, maybe it's something that's, I don't know, sexist or racist or offensive or inflammatory, just a couple of things to think about. Number one, to the extent possible, form your communication as a teachable moment. You might be angry and upset at the student, but before you send something, remember that you're the teacher, and even if it's tough to do, try to encapsulate that communication with the student about that terrible post they made as a teachable moment. If a student says something in a face-to-face class that's racist, you probably, well, you don't let it slide. You definitely address it, but you probably address it in a way that you can try to make it a teachable moment, right? I mean, online discussions are a place where students might take risks. They might say something that they're not sure about, and they might make mistakes. Maybe they're intentional, but maybe they're a mistake. Maybe they didn't realize it was racist or sexist or offensive. Maybe they wanted to be provocative, but they went over the top. So I'll just say, think about it as a teachable moment. Make that your first, reach out as a teacher to a student. If things escalate, which they might, realize that everything you write in your reply to that student may be something that your online chair, online lead, dean reads. So, make sure that what you say is something that you're going to be happy with other people reading, and that will probably help you frame it in a professional way as a teachable moment. Describe the post, describe what was wrong with it, describe what the negative impacts were. How does this derail the class? How does it, make other students uncomfortable? How does it make you feel uncomfortable? Where possible, don't impugn the student's motives. Assume it's a mistake, or give the student the benefit of the doubt that what they were doing, they tried to do something positive and it turned out to be negative or, over the edge. If you can, suggest how the student could have said the same thing or something similar in a better, more productive way. Consider offering suggestions for next time. Here's an alternative way you could have done that, which would have worked better, right? You might have actually not turned students off. How could you have pulled students in and, because it's probably what the student wanted, assuming they aren't just a troll in your class. They probably were posting something with the intention that someone else would reply and do something positive. Assuming that's true, what could the student have done differently? Reiterate appropriate discussion behavior. If you have discussion rules, which you should, make sure to say, I did address this in week 1. Make sure to go back and look at the rules for virtuous discourse or whatever. Be clear about the consequences. Hopefully, if it's the first time, there aren't any consequences this time other than to say, be careful next time about doing this. But if there are consequences, be clear about those. I'm going to turn in a student of concern form. I'm going to do this, or whatever you're going to do. Leave the door open. If you're framing it as a teachable moment, when you reach out by email, your intent should probably be to leave the student feeling good about replying to you and leave them an open door so they can have a positive reply, right? So again, I think you want to frame that in a way where you're inviting them to respond to you in a way that's positive, whatever that means, and save everything. New rules. I don't know what your current discussion rules are. I'm happy to look at those for you. But if you decide that whatever rules you have aren't working, you don't have to wait until next semester. You could implement rules for next week. For instance, if you're experiencing students who are posting way too many posts per week, next week you could say, each student is limited to 2 or 3 posts per week, or you can make as many posts as you want, but not more than 2 per day. Students are less likely to make 20 posts if they have to break it up over 7 days in the week. So this is something I often do. Week 2, I might say, post as much as you want, but you can't make more than 2 posts per discussion topic per day. Or maybe each student has an upper limit of 5 posts per week. Students that post too much can, for one thing, it can clog up the discussions. It can set a bar that's unsustainable for other students. So too many posts is probably not what you want. Inform students about the art of reply. It's something I do. I tell students, often what works better than making an original post is replying in a way that's productive and meaningful. And so I'll talk more about the art of reply, or reach out to me if you want to see my take on why original posts aren't all the be-all and end-all of discussion. In fact, the original posts students make are probably just to set up the good replies, hopefully. You can use pinned prompts. You can make posts as the instructor, pin them to the top of the discussion board, and then say something like this: don't make any original posts this week. Just reply to the prompts I've already made. That can help you frame the discussion for the week in a way that's more fruitful for students. You may say something like this. This is something I do. Every post and reply needs an original title. If you reply, you have to delete the default title and come up with your own title. This really stops students from just making tons and tons of posts. It stops the one-liners. If you've got something worth saying, you need to come up with a title that represents and encapsulates or summarizes what your reply is. Again, that really slows students down. It makes all their posts better. And challenge students to become discussion leaders. Again, often students that are making those provocative or quote-unquote difficult posts are students that they want to participate in discussion. And so I suggest reaching out to them one-on-one and encouraging them and saying, I've seen you posting in discussions a lot. I know you're taking discussion seriously. I wonder if you'd be willing to help me as a discussion leader to help the class move more toward the kind of discussion I want. I had a student last semester who posted a lot, but many of his posts were off on tangents, and he would often ask more questions and not really post anything positive. And so I reached out to the student and I said, you're doing great work in discussion, but what I would really like your help with, if you're up for a challenge, what I would really love for you to do is to help me moderate discussions and help students get to these other goals. And man, this student ate that up. He wanted to impress me. And so, he went from being a student who posted a lot, but his posts were a little bit problematic, to a student who kept posting a lot, but his posts were extremely productive. It made the student feel good. It actually helped the overall discussions succeed. You may want to differentiate different types of discussions. I've got an entire workshop on types of discussion assignments. One of the problems students have in discussions is they don't know what you want. They don't know if you want them to explore ideas or get the right answer. So help the student know what is that discussion about and how can they succeed in that discussion. You probably need to figure out what your goals are for your different discussion assignments before you can be really clear to the students. If you have open discussion topics, I suggest that you become an active participant facilitator. Don't wait until the end of the week. Don't do summaries for open discussions. One way to prevent problems is to be in there, an active player in your own discussions. It may be tempting for students to be trolls if they never see you in discussions. If they see you in there all the time, participating and moderating, one of the things is you are setting an example of the kind of discussion activity you're looking for. So you're also in there. You can see when something goes off the rails and you can reply to it right away. You may decide to require content mastery before the discussion. Maybe it's not a surprise that students have problematic discussion posts when they're trying to discuss things they don't understand. In my class, I require students to quiz to mastery early in the week, which really is a guarantee that they have the basic understanding of the core concepts, and that gives them the ability to actually have meaningful, productive discussions. Once I instituted content mastery quizzes, the quality of my discussions went way up because students were no longer, for instance, trying to discuss Descartes without having read Descartes. That's difficult. And use rubrics, right? I mean, use rubrics so students know what the expectations are, give them that feedback right away or ASAP so they know if they're on track or not. Briefly, discussion is a tool. In D2L, there is a discussion tool. It is a tool for interaction, and it is a tool with lots of uses. I think one of the kinds of discussions we do is open discussion, and I'll let you pause the video if you want to read more about how I think about open discussion. Here's my grading rubric for open discussion. And I think the other kind of discussion we often use is called a writing prompt. So this is, if you do something that says this, every student must make an original post by a certain day in the week and then reply to 2 students by another day in the week, you're doing what I call a writing prompt. And so I think this may help you with clarity about what the expectations are for your discussions. Are you asking students to do open discussion? Or are you asking them to do what I call a writing prompt? In my class, those are 2 separate assignments with 2 separate grading rubrics. My advice is look at your discussions and see if you have competing goals or competing purposes. And if you do, you may get better results if you peel apart those things into 2 different kinds of assignments. I already talked about content mastery. This is a clip from my class. This is very typical now. By the end of the day on Tuesday, almost every student in the class is earning 100% on the quiz, which gives me a lot of hope that by Wednesday and through the end of the week, the discussions are going to be fruitful because students, they know that they know what they're talking about. And guess what? When they see this statistic, they realize that the other students in the class have a common currency with what's going on as well. This has really raised the bar in the class. It's provided it's provided the framework for meaningful discussions where people aren't going off on unproductive tangents. They're not posting a whole bunch of things that are misinformed. Doesn't mean they're all getting the right answer. My discussions usually aren't about getting the right answer, but this is separating out the facts and the basic ideas that there are right and wrong answers from the discussion, which is usually about what? How do we take those ideas and do something with them? What about students that are disrespectful to their classmates? Maybe they're making offensive posts. Maybe they have an aggressive or confrontational style. Maybe they're trying to sell Amway or whatever. They're having students sign petitions. They're using discussions for personal or business or non-academic purposes. I don't know, asking each other out on dates or something. Or you've probably had this student, or maybe you haven't. That they really they're participating, but with maybe the goal of undermining the class, or you suspect that might be what's going on. So first of all, if you see a disrespectful post, an offensive post, address it right away. Address it both publicly and privately. Don't delete an offensive post. Once you delete a post, it's gone. You may need that post if you filed a student of concern form. If another student already read it and they see it as a Title IX violation, you don't want to have deleted that post. You can move a post if you absolutely have to delete it. Talk to someone before. The other problem with deleting a post is other students may have already read it. If it's in an open discussion forum, I think the post deserves a reply from you. The reply can be something like, whoa, this seems like it's kind of gone off the rails. I'm going to reach out to you by personal email. If everybody else has read this, realize that, this can happen when we're in an open discussion. Sometimes, something can go off the rails, but we're going to try to, turn this into something more positive. Or, I just think it probably deserves to be addressed in public so other students will read the offensive or disrespectful post. They'll see that you were there, that you were on it, that you replied to it, that you're dealing with it in a productive way. Again, imagine a face-to-face class. When a student in a face-to-face class says something that's racist, you don't ignore it and just wait until the end of class. You say something, right? I mean, you're going to jump on it. You're going to say something, hopefully in a productive way that makes it a teachable moment, that leaves the student who made a mistake, it leaves them feeling okay, and lets the rest of the class know that you're on it, right? That you're facilitating and moderating the class. I think it's good advice to consider first offenses to be teachable moments. Maybe the student didn't realize it was offensive. And even if they did and they made a mistake, treat it as a teachable moment, I think, as a way to bring down everyone's anxiety level. And again, don't delete the posts. How can we prevent disrespectful posts? Hang on, let me back up. Here's normally what I do. And again, this has happened only a handful of times in my classes. When a student says something that's out of bounds, I will reply to it publicly in discussions to deal with it in a public way, the way I probably would try to in a face-to-face class, and then I will email the student with more, right? Whatever it is I want to actually talk to that student about, but I'll do it in both places. Preventing disrespectful discussion. Have rules for virtuous discourse or netiquette or whatever you call it. Focus on entertaining ideas. Help students understand the purpose of discussions. Bridge the empathy gap. Lead by example, and talk about freedom of speech in the classroom. First of all, freedom of speech. In the classroom, none of us has full freedom of speech. So as the teacher, it is your responsibility to moderate discussion. It is not the case that in an online class, students can say anything. So, it's up to you to decide, we got to make sure things are happening in class that aren't illegal, that aren't, making other students feel bad, distracting from their learning. We need to make sure that students aren't polluting the whole learning environment because what they're saying is offensive to you, or it's, hurting you in a way that's putting you in a position where you can't teach the class. I am happy to share my rules for virtuous discourse. I tell students things like, we're all in it together, that I'm here to facilitate, everyone's participating. I talk about reading before you post, posting early in the week, make every post count, avoid one-liners, how to not feel overwhelmed. So, these are just things that I talk about in my online class that really help students figure out what is it that online discussions are about. This is not like, the discussion boards on the Fox News site or on Reddit or wherever else they are out on the internet where flaming and trolling and being mean to people is the standard. In an online class, what rules for discussion do you have? How will they be enforced? And again, I provide this in week 1. I talk about it throughout the semester. Don't let sparks become flames. No matter how diligent you are, students may post something that other students read before you get a chance to respond to it. It is my goal that no student makes things worse, right? A student posts something that's out of line, some other student reads it, but before they reply to it with their own terrible post, they email me. Hey, Eric, I don't know if you saw Josh's post, but I really thought it was over the line and sexist, and it really, really upset me and it made me feel bad. Can you go and take a look at it? I love that because then I go and take a look at it. I can deal with that post. I want students, I tell them, don't reply in kind, right? If you see something that you don't think is right, that you think is inappropriate, let me know and I'll deal with it. So anyway, but I will also say this. I encourage students to take risks. It's okay if you've accidentally posted something that someone saw as sexist or racist or that was inaccurate. I would rather students take a risk in the safe place of an online philosophy class. Sometimes students say things when we're talking about philosophy of religion that hurts some other student's feelings, that makes that student feel bad. I address it, but in my class, I want students to take risks, and I know when students take risks, we can make mistakes. I try to frame my class as a time of exploring ideas, and so I let students know. You may make a mistake, your classmates may make a mistake in this class, but I'm here to make sure that everything stays within these normal bounds of etiquette, and we're all in it together. I don't want students to be so afraid of making a mistake in discussion that they're not talking about interesting things. I try to frame my discussions around this concept that I call entertaining ideas. when I started actually telling students that this is what we're doing, it really helped them in discussions. It helped me hold them accountable to not simply try to undermine what the authors in our philosophy class are talking about or what other students are talking about. You've probably seen this. Really smart students often want to show how smart they are by attacking, dismantling, picking apart other people's arguments. That is part of what philosophy is, right? Critiquing arguments. But I try to tell students the first most important thing we're going to be doing in our discussions is entertaining ideas. I am interested in how you want to criticize an idea, but only after I'm confident that you understand the idea by looking at it in its strongest possible light. So, I don't want us to focus on the principle of mockery, right? I want us to focus on the principle of entertaining the idea, right? The principle of charity. So, this may be, I don't know, provocative language for you, but I tell students this: immature thinkers take pride in pointing out flaws in arguments they don't really understand. It's easy to do and it's fun, but it's fast food thinking. In our class, when you're ready to reply to your classmate and tell them how wrong their idea was, stop. Before you do that, restate to your fellow classmate what you think they're saying in the strongest possible way. Offer them more evidence for their point. Help them flesh out their argument before we start to tear things down. I actually then hear my students saying this to each other, right? What I'm going to try to do is entertain this idea. I don't agree with it, but here's what I think you're trying to say, right? That sort of thing. If you want to read more about my take on entertaining ideas, please reach out to me. Again, you've seen this slide. I want to talk about bridging the empathy gap. I think there are lots of ways to do it, and one of them is to show your face in class. If you can't show your face in class, I think you want to make sure that students know when they're having discussion with each other, they're talking to real people. That might be something like making sure that you're offering students the chance to build social community. And maybe you need some social community as the foundation for that kind of academic community you want. So if you're the kind of person that says, I don't really care that students make friends with each other, I get that. But maybe they need an opportunity somewhere in the class through icebreakers or through other ways where they actually get to build some sort of friendship or some sort of trust on a personal level, so that they can do that kind of academic community that you really want them to do, whether it's in discussion or in peer reviews or wherever else. Showing images. I ask students to upload profile pictures, and if they don't want to show their face, I ask them to upload some sort of representative image. In discussions, it's nice to see that there's a person's picture there when you read something, as opposed to that silhouette that D2L provides as the default. You can have students do biographies or profiles, and you can also offer incentives and whole class feedback. It's something I do in my class. I give screencast feedback where I talk about what students have said in discussion, and I use their names. Last week, you might have read that Amy and Holly were having this conversation about the good life, and it was really great. And I try to name as many student names as I can to make sure that they know that I know that they're real people too. You may not think that quizzes are a cohort building activity, but in my online class, everyone is incentivized to try to earn 100% on the quiz every week by Tuesday, and they get an individual incentive because if they earn 100%, they earn a place in the 100% club. And there is an ongoing challenge in my class where I want the entire class to earn 100% on the quiz. And if they do, I want to offer them an incentive. I want to give the entire class extra credit. So every time they take the quiz, they get to see the statistic. This gives them an incentive to realize that, wow, everyone else in the class is way up here to 95%. I'm not going to be satisfied with my 80%. This seems trivial, but adding this slide where students see the statistic every time they take the quiz, they see the whole class. This has really helped the students think of themselves as a cohort, and it has gone a long way to, I think, making my online class a better class. This is an example of how I do entire class feedback. I may read through a discussion. And instead of offering individualized feedback, I do a screencast where I actually talk about what happened in the discussion and I name names. And let's see if I've got any slides. A few more tips for successful discussions. And I know this screencast has gone on really long. If you're still with me, if you send me an email, I'll offer you an incentive. I'll give you a star and a point of extra credit. Seriously, we're at 1 hour and 14 minutes and 24 seconds. If you're actually watching this, open your email or in D2L, send me an email, and I will give you praise personally for sticking with me for this long. Some tips for discussions. When you have open discussion, if you have a discussion where you want everyone to talk to everyone and it's really about exploring ideas, be a participant. One of the best joys in an online class is being able to be in there with your students, to see them doing work, to see their confusions while they're happening, to see them go on productive tangents. Be in open discussions as a participant. Reply. This is your chance to lead by example, to make an impression on your students that you are there, that you matter, that they matter to you. It can really help build that intrinsic motivation, not only for your students, but for you. And what I love about this is the feedback is really happening in that open discussion. When problems happen in discussions that involve dyads or triads, so if this is in a writing prompt sort of discussion, there's just fewer problems, right? I mean, if there's a problem in an open discussion, everyone might see the problem, right? If there's a racist post in an open discussion, you want to be in there to see it right away. If you have a discussion that says make a post and reply to 2 classmates, it's not that that problematic post isn't still a problem, but it's probably the case that only 1 or 2 other students actually saw it. So you have a little bit more time, I think, to deal with these kinds of problems. There are fewer opportunities for problems to crop up. And I'll offer this advice. Be thoughtful about non-academic discussion areas. If you've got an open discussion area, a coffee shop, a student union, a place that students can just talk about whatever they want, this may be a place that students can build positive social connections, but it also invites discussions that are out of bounds. It invites students to be talking about business or dating, which may not be what you want students doing. And if you do have them, remember that you need to moderate those too. So, I mean, I've definitely seen this happen where instructors are really diligent about looking at the discussions that count for credit, but in these kind of out of bounds places, students may be doing all kinds of things that you don't want them doing. So if you have them, it's fine, have a reason for it, but make sure you're moderating them. And last but not least, what about when students are disrespectful for you? When they're challenging your authority, when they're rude or aggressive in emails or in discussions, or when they attempt to rally other students to mutiny against you, and I have seen this happen a few times, what can we do about it? First of all, try not to take it personally. That's not easy, but try not to. Don't reply until you've cooled off a little bit, and consider going straight to a phone or a face-to-face meeting. Sometimes an email response just may not be the best way to handle it. Don't retaliate. You may feel justified in retaliating. You may feel justified in using your writing prowess and your sarcasm prowess to really nail that student, but just don't do it. Be the bigger person, be the teacher. Don't take it personally and don't retaliate. Before you respond, talk to someone. Talk to me, talk to a colleague, talk to your online lead. Blow off some steam, get some advice before you respond. This may not happen in 10 years of online teaching. You may not have a student that is directly disrespectful, who you think is really trying to push your buttons, who you think is actually trying to undermine you or be mean to you or threaten you. If it does, take this advice. First of all, if a student has already done something that you think is intentional, anticipate that this is going to escalate. So all this communication is going to be read by someone else. So keep that in mind before you reply. One thing you might do is, if you get a communication that is very rude or aggressive, you might say this: before I will read the rest of your email, I need you to rewrite it in a way that is polite and professional. You may actually say, I only got 3 lines into your email and I feel disrespected already. So this is a rude email that's out of line. I'm happy to look at your concerns, but they need to be written in a way that's professional and polite. So if you send me a professional, polite email, I'm happy to respond to you. I've seen this work in a productive way. Either the student will realize what they're doing is out of bounds, or they'll actually take the time to rewrite it, and that's probably good. And consider utilizing formal student discipline procedures. Maybe you want to do a student of concern form. Maybe you want to take this directly to the Dean of Student Services, etc. So, I think when you get that email, deal with it. You probably won't have to, but deal with it in the best way you can after getting advice. But how can we maybe prevent or make these sorts of disrespecting students, the things they're doing, less likely? Number one, lead by example. If you show your students by examples what discussions and emails are supposed to look like, they may respond in kind. Teach your students how to email their instructor. I actually use a video. I tell students, watch this 5-minute video. I'm happy to share it with you. I figure every time a student sends an email to their instructor, they have a purpose in mind. They have a goal and an outcome they're looking for. Just in terms of rhetoric, I try to help them get what they want by teaching them how to write a polite, respectful email that a teacher might be the most likely to respond positively to. Have and reiterate your rules for virtuous discourse, which we've also talked about, and have a mutual respect policy that may be part of your net etiquette, and if not, you could add it. So model good discussions. You can just see this is a discussion response that I made, and you can probably see how I'm responding to a student who said something and I'm kind of disagreeing in a positive way. When I do this enough times, other students start saying, that's how you reply, in a way that talks about entertaining ideas. So show your students what it means to be a positive, good discussion subject in an online class. If you want to watch my email on how to email your instructor, I'm happy to send that to you. It's 5 minutes long. It's in YouTube. This is what I show. This is what I show my students, and I can really see once they watch it, I start getting pretty good emails from students. And have a mutual respect policy. If you want to follow this link or pause it and write it down, CCC Online, the System Offices Online College, they have this mutual respect policy, and I have to say I really like it. So maybe you want to adopt something like this for your online class. Other ways that you might prevent students from disrespecting you: be a real human, and we've already talked about that. The more ways you can bridge that empathy gap. It's easy for students to be mean in email to someone that they don't even think of as a real person in the first place. Yes, some students might be mean to you even if they do know you're a real person, but I think this may be more likely to happen in an online class. So all those ways that you can bridge the empathy gap for other reasons we've talked about probably pay off here too, and demonstrate your credibility and your expertise. Students may actually think there's no instructor there. Even if they know there's an instructor there, how do you help demonstrate that you have a PhD or a master's degree or 10 years of experience, right? Those are things that might come across if they see you face to face. You may want to think about different ways of demonstrating that credibility and expertise in an online class. This is my last slide. Tell students you're all in it together. Let them know that it's not just them. When I was asking you, I asked fellow online front range instructors, what do you do to bridge the empathy gap? One of you said this: you just flat out tell students, I'm an instructor. I teach a couple classes for front range, but I have a day job too. There's a reason why it might take me 24 or 48 hours to get back to you. There's a reason why I didn't respond to you immediately. I've got a day job too, right? And so this was interesting. This instructor wasn't doing this to make an excuse for why it took him 48 hours to reply. It was really to help the student realize, look, I'm a real person too. I'm struggling with my own time management issues just like you are. And I really like this approach. I think one of the ways to demonstrate your Competence as a teacher is the kind of instructor-generated content you have. That content that you create or curate is a way for your students to see your professionalism, your credibility, why you're a content expert in the class. You want to give them meaningful feedback, authentic feedback early in the semester so they know that you know who they are, that you care about them in a way that matters. And, can you be authentic? Can you be personal? Can your style and humor come through? Can you be fun? Whatever personality and style you have that comes across in a face-to-face class, how can you try to make that come through in an online class so your students see you as a real person? This is not live, obviously, so we can't stop for questions and answers, but I'm almost an hour and a half into this. I decided not to stop, not to go slower. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it might have made you feel better. Maybe you're already doing a lot of these things in your online class, or I gave you a few items of food for thought, things you might do this semester. And if nothing else, I'll leave you with this. If this semester you run into a student problem, students that's annoying or disruptive, reach out to me. Let's talk about it. I'd love more anecdotes. I'd love to help you. I don't think there'll be many of these problems this semester, but if you end up winning the lottery and getting a problematic student, you're not alone. We're here to help you. I'm going to close out now. Eric Salahub. I went almost an hour and a half, which is way too long, but I hope this was helpful.